how did you get so interested in Iran? Why are you, because you're Israeli American, and but you focus a lot on Iranian issues and Iranian people and the Islamic Republic. So how did you get into that?
And that's a really good question, actually. And also because I'm not Iranian at all, like at all, a lot of people think like, oh, maybe she's like part Iranian and that's why she's interested in it. But it's funny, actually. I mean, I'm originally from Los Angeles before I moved to Israel about 10 years ago, permanently, but about 10 years ago. And in Los Angeles, it's like, I mean, we call it Tehrangeles, right? Both Jewish Persians and non-Jewish Persians. Huge, huge community there. And I was always around them. Like I always grew up with that. And I studied at USC for my undergrad. And there was a huge Persian population there as well. And when it comes to Israel, or the Jewish community, I should say, a lot of the Persian Jewish community also attended USC. So when we're talking about like Hillel on campus or Chabad on campus, these groups for Jewish students or Jewish life on campus, I was very involved with them. And it's funny because politically, I genuinely never saw them as different causes. I know that sounds crazy now, but like even when I was in university, it was just logical to me that like if you support Israel, you support the people of Iran and vice versa. You know, like it makes sense. It doesn't mean you agree with everything, of course, but there is a shared ideological solidarity there. And it just like in my head, like that makes sense because we're talking about an oppressive, evil dictatorship that has hijacked the entire country of Iran and 80 million people there. For 45 plus years. I mean, at the time it was less than that, but now 45 plus years. And so when we're talking about the battle against Islamic extremism and terrorism and support for these terror groups, or in the case of the Islamic regime, actually building these terrorist organizations all around the Middle East that disproportionately harm Arab Muslims even more than it harms Israel. I mean, of course I'm against it. Of course we have to speak out against it. Of course that regime is against every single value that is enshrined and protected in the American Constitution, not to mention civil rights, which are protected in the state of Israel as a democracy. So for me, it was always logical that I would be active and follow and speak out against the Islamic regime in Iran. And I only realized a few years later that like a lot of the Jewish community doesn't really know these things. They don't really understand how bad this regime really is for the West, okay? We're not even talking about complex Middle Eastern politics, but for themselves, for their own survival and well-being, and for the marketplace of ideas, which has now been really hijacked by dictatorships thanks to social media and how they can pervert that. But that's another issue I'm sure we'll get into. But that was sort of how I came into following the issues with Iran. It was always on my radar. I did a lot of work for women's rights and women's issues. So it's logical, of course, that I followed everything happening both in Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East, but also in Iran, given that those are the two worst places in the world to be a woman right now, Iran and Afghanistan, which is very, very sad because, you know, Iran prior to the Islamic Republic was one of the most progressive, certainly in the Middle East. I think they were the most progressive country, up there with Israel, perhaps even more so at the time. And they were right up there with most of the Western world as well. And instead they've had 45 years of being taken the other direction by these, Neanderthals who have taken over the country.
No offense to Neanderthals. They're
what?
actually,
Yeah. No offense to
Neanderthals. Yes. They were actually not that bad. The way I look at it is that the Iranian people and Israeli people are natural allies because they are in the Middle East and they seem to be alone. They seem to be in an environment. They're the most liberal people in the Middle East. They are facing the same enemy both politically and ideologically. Politically, their enemy is the Islamic Republic. Ideologically, they seem to be fighting for life against a cult of death. Both of them, their main chant coming from both sides has life in it. The Iranian people say woman, life, freedom. The Israeli people say I'm Israel Kai. So they both are fighting for life. The other side is a cult of death, fighting for the afterlife, fighting for death, saying that we love death more than you love life. I don't know, a lot of pro-regime people insult us as life lovers. They call, do you know that this is an insult by
you know,
them?
we
They call
receive
us
the same thing from Hamas, from
right,
Palestinian society. We hear this a lot, that our strength
right.
is that we love death.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, you are right now in a bunker. Okay, so I ask you permission to, because there's a lot more, because apparently we're getting close to a ceasefire. So Hezbollah is basically trying to get as many missiles there as possible before a ceasefire. So just in case you hear alarms or something, guys, Emily is right now in a bunker because the missiles are being sent her way, and we don't know what might happen at any second. So this is a reality that a lot of Israeli people always have to deal with. Has it been normalized, or is it still stressful? Like, how do you deal with something like that?
I mean, I don't know that there's any right way to deal with it. But I would say, like, it's been more than a year of this off and on. In Tel Aviv, where I am, it's a little bit it's been hit a little bit less hard than like the north, or at the beginning of the war, right around Gaza, the communities around Gaza that were attacked on October 7th. So it's not as bad here. But I will say it's not really something you ever get used to. It's always stressful because you just don't know where it's going to land, or you don't know what's going to happen next. But at the same time, I think myself and all of Israeli society, like, we don't stop doing anything we would have done before. And this is something that's like within the ethos of the country. You got to keep going. You got to keep going. There is no other option. As terrible as it is and as tragic as it is, this is something that that Israelis are actually very good at. Lots of things we need to work on still, but this is something that we're very good at, that you don't stop living just because people are attacking you and just because people are trying to destroy the country. You find joy where you can. And if that means that, like, you're at a coffee shop with your friends and a siren goes off and you all go to the bomb shelter together and you wait for 10 or 15 minutes until you see if the Iron Dome had shot down any of these rockets, or if it was hitting an area that's close to you, after that amount of time, you go back. And you go back to your lunch and you continue. You don't go home and cower all day long. You keep living the best that you can. Now, I'm home and by myself. So, of course, I prefer to be in a bomb shelter rather than be surprised and have to run. But at the same time, I wouldn't let it stop me from anything that I was planning to do.